Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today's video is a what we eat in a week. So generally speaking, post the hamper, I do a bit of a what we eat in a week type of a video, and then toward the very last week before we do our 6 weekly grocery haul. They're the two sort of time periods that people are most interested in seeing what we eat in that period of time with what we've got. So this is the week post the hamper. Now obviously we're using food that we have as well as what came in the hamper, because the hamper is just a supplement to things. It's not a full, haul for us. And then I'll try and do one later on as well. So that last week, the very last week of the 6 weeks, where we're trying to scrape things together as much as possible with what we've got left and that sort of thing. As I said, that's what most people are interested in. They like to see those sort of things. And then post the grocery hauls and that, I do my daily videos, and most of the time you see what I'm eating in that period of time anyway. And a lot of the time some of the stuff that I'm making ends up on video, separate videos too. So some of this is double up, but I know that a lot of people who may not want to watch my long form videos on food, my prep videos and things like that, still like to eat the what we eat in a week. It gives it that really condensed format of a variety of meals that can be inspiration, and a run-on of meals too. So it sometimes shows you how I use a product over like 3 different meals. So I'll prepare it one way and then we'll have it a different way the next morning and a different way the next day and all that sort of thing. I find that these what we eat in a week videos really show that as a way of how it works. So generally these are a pretty popular sort of a video. So it also helps to put me in front of new viewers who wouldn't necessarily watch me. There's a lot of people who find me via the grocery haul videos or these what we eat in a week, and they say, well, haven't I ever seen you before? And it's just YouTube and putting it in front of people. So this type of video generally gets a bit of a wider audience, which is helpful for me as well. They are a lot of work to put together. Being able to collate a week's worth of meals into one video, keeping track of it throughout the week, and then putting it all in one spot, and then voiceovering it in a way that it makes sense too is sometimes hard. But I enjoy doing them, and I kind of find that they're a good talking point as well. And I like watching other people's ones as well, because it is inspiration. It is an ability to look at a whole bunch of meals all mixed up together, and it inspires me to think, well, maybe I'll try something like that next week or whatever else. So that's why I do them. Now, a disclaimer at the beginning, I do this at the beginning of most of my what we eat in a weeks. I don't generally show breakfast. The kids have breakfast when they get up at 7 a.m. or whatever. They have porridge that I generally cook for them, chocolate porridge they really like, so a cacao, kefir based porridge. Or they have granola and yogurt, because I make yogurt regularly, and I make a sourdough granola for them. Or they have cereal with rice milk. So you'll have to excuse me, there's mosquitoes flying around. Or they have cereal and rice milk. So I buy Wheat Bix, rice bubbles and cornflakes. That's sort of it. And then if we get some specialty cereal in the hamper, they have that as well. And they eat that with rice milk, because that's their milk of preference. It's probably a familiarity thing, but I've tried introducing other milks and nothing else has really tickled them. So rice milk is what they like. Towards the end of the month, they do run out of rice milk. Because I can only buy a certain amount, because it's all that's on the shelf, but also because of spacing, like having the space on my shops to be able to do it. So that's when we tend to do more in the way of porridges and things like that. So they eat at like 7 o'clock. Darryl and I only really eat 2 meals a day, sort of a mid-morning to lunch and a dinner. So what I show most days is that the mid-morning lunch meal that we eat, the kids generally eat that as well. Like that is their lunch, or it's another meal for the day, because, kids have multiple meals in a day. And then dinner is dinner. So there is lots of snacks and stuff in between that isn't shown. A lot of fresh fruit. We do popcorn. We do corn chips. We do leftovers, baked cakes and all that sort of thing. So I'm only really showing you the 2 main meals of each day. Now, sometimes I don't even have 2 main meals to show you, because I'll have, we've eaten a leftover of some sort, or Darryl or one of the kids has heated up something for dinner and I haven't filmed it. But I let you know, generally speaking, during that period. So this is a week, what we eat in a week approximately, after our monthly A4 community care hamper. So enjoy watching, and see you next time. So my most recent video, I showed that I did some things with pork. So one of the things that I did with pork was I made the pulled carnita style pork. And so we eat that for a few meals following on from that, obviously. So I bought myself some masa to make some corn tortillas, to attempt to make fresh corn tortillas. I've bought corn tortillas before, but the thing is that things like that don't last forever on a shelf. So I don't buy them very often, and if I do, then you have to eat them within a fairly quick time of when you buy the groceries. So I wanted to be able to make my own fresh ones, and maybe one day when I eventually get a mill-to-mill flour and mill corn and stuff, I can nixtamalize my own corn and make my own fresh masa. That'd be really neat to do, but you know, a lot of work. But buying the masa, I got it off Amazon and I had free shipping because I have a Prime membership, so it wasn't overly expensive for the quantity you get out of it, but it's not exactly cheap either. So we did for brunch, lunch, whatever you want to call it, we did the fresh corn tortillas served with the pulled pork and with avocado and stuff. Now the tortillas worked really well. I was really happy with them. They were really simple to do, really quick to go through them and things like that. So they're definitely going to be something that's on more regular rotation, though I might have to do some Googling about different things that you eat corn tortillas with. You can eat them with anything, I'm sure, like any sort of a flatbread, but I might try and look at some different recipes to use out of curiosity with the corn tortillas, because I think just it'd be nice to add a few different things in. It's always nice to add some variations in what we're already eating. For dinner that night, we did homemade brioche rolls. So I'd made them during the day, brioche rolls, and baked them. And we had that with the pulled pork and coleslaw on the rolls. We also did chips that I had made. Now, a couple of videos ago, I was talking about how I had tried frying some chips because we had some vegetable oil that we were using to fry something else. And I tried frying some chips, parboiling the chips first, steaming them, and then frying them. But they just didn't end up crunchy. I got told that I need to fry them a second time. So this time I fried them twice. I probably needed to turn the oil down a little bit for that second fry because they ended up very brown, but they weren't burnt and they didn't taste burnt or anything. Definitely crunchy. It still was a lot of work, like to make enough chips for all of us and without using a huge pot with a huge amount of oil. It was many batches that went into the pan, pulled out to drain, batch in, pulled out to drain, and then at the end putting the batches in to fry again. But they were really good, so they were definitely worthwhile, but they are a bit of a time-consuming kind of a meal. And with the homemade brioche rolls with the pulled pork and the coleslaw, it was a bit of a decadent dinner, but very much like going to a burger shop and a takeaway thing. I think I used my homemade bacon salt on this too, so I've been fiddling with a bunch of recipes to make my own bacon seasoning, because Delissio has a bacon seasoning that I really like, and it used to be $5.60 at Woolworths. You could get it on sale for about the $3.40 mark every now and again, and when I looked last shopping trip, it was $7.50, and I'm not paying $7.50 for a little jar of seasoning salt. So I have been working on my bacon salt. I will share that, and mushroom salt, because Darryl really likes mushroom salt, so I'll have to share both of those. So that was day one. On day two, I made corn tortillas again. So when I bought the masa, I bought blue masa and yellow masa. From what I had read, they have slightly different flavor profiles, but I just thought it was kind of neat anyway, and they were the same price. So I did the blue corn this time. Now, I did learn while I was doing it that, well, or what I assume I learned while I was doing it, was that if they're not left long enough after so you cook them and you put them in a container or a tea towel to steam, so that they stay nice and soft, a tortilla warmer, clean tea towel, whatever, like you do with flour tortillas. That's my understanding anyway. And then you cook them off again if you're cooking them off again, or you eat them soft, however you want them. Now, I was cooking them off again by putting, especially mine, because I put cheese in it, so I wanted it to melt. But I realized that the ones that had been sitting in the container steaming for a while folded nicely, and if the ones that hadn't steamed soft cracked a fair bit. Now, it could be that I just got the ratios wrong in the dough, but I did it the same as I did the yellow ones, and the yellow ones worked fine, but I did a lot bigger batch of the yellow ones, so by the time I was frying them, they'd been sitting there for longer. I don't know, feedback in the comments if you know what I've done there, but they were tasty. I didn't really find much taste difference between the blue and the yellow, to be honest, but that could just be my undisciplined palate for that sort of thing. But it was kind of neat to have the blue ones, though it was harder to tell when they were cooked. Like, the yellow ones have that browning spots, and it makes it kind of easy to see. The blue ones didn't have that as much. I don't have dinner for this day filmed, so it was possible that we had leftover pulled pork with something else, or leftover corn tortillas, or spaghetti bolognese, or something simple like that. Something that someone else prepared and I didn't film. So no dinner for that day to share. The next day for breakfast we had English muffins. Now these are my sourdough overnight English muffins, except that the dough was really overproofed. So I had used the second fridge to proof the dough, and the fridge has gotten worse rather than better with what we've been trying to do. We've now turned it off. We're not using it at all. But the dough was really overproofed, really sloppy. So I had to add more flour in to get it handleable, but I'd already made it. It's a lot of dough to waste, so I just added more flour into it, added the bicarb soda as usual, and then flattened it out and cut it out. I could tell just by the feel of it that it was a whole lot more dense than it should be for an English muffin, but it didn't really matter. We could cut them open and toast them and have them however. So I also didn't do them on the stovetop. So normally I do them in my cast iron pan with a lid, 6 to 8 minutes each side, and do them like that. But I was a bit short on time, so instead of doing that, I did them on a baking tray in the barbecue in my oven. So I just cut them, placed them on the trays, let them sit for 20 minutes just to get a little bit puffy again, and then baked them in the oven. They were dense, but they were more than edible. We had them with bacon and eggs. The kids ate them all. There was a couple left that I used for breadcrumbs for something. But mostly the whole 3 trays worth of them were eaten in that day for lunch or whatever was eaten, whatever. I'm pretty sure we had bacon and eggs on them. I don't know if I'm showing that there, but the kids ate them. Bacon, eggs, English muffins. They weren't my best work, but you know, they were okay. I appear to not have a dinner here, but I'm not sure. So I'm not sure why, but there appears to not be a dinner on this day either. So we will see how we go. I think I've got a few extra days here because I missed some meals throughout the days. So the next day was Easter, and we had sourdough apple fritters for breakfast, and that was at Darryl's request because we had the oil from something else that we'd used. I don't know what, can't remember now. The chips maybe. So my sourdough apple fritters, I'll do a full video on them because it has been requested. So this is just a highlights. So it's sourdough starter and apple, basically. And then you fry them off. Because it was Easter, we did a coconut dip as well. So I did, I'll go over that when I do the apple fritter, but melted sort of like a chocolate icing done with coconut cream into a dip, sort of a consistency with some sugar and cacao and some coconut cream made into a dip. So we fried them off and we had them dipped in that. It was very, very decadent. But you know, it was Easter morning, so any excuse for chocolate and all that. We also had sourdough focaccia that day for lunch because it was Easter. I went a little bit all out with having like a cooked breakfast as well as a cooked lunch as such. So I did my overnight sourdough focaccia, which we really, really enjoy. So it was prepared the night before, and all the process, I've got a whole video on making the focaccia. And then what I did was I did a garlic, cherry tomato and rosemary confit. So I put cherry tomatoes that came in the hamper with some rosemary sprigs from the garden and some garlic in, and covered it with olive oil, and then a drizzle of balsamic vinegar. And then you want to cook it on low, so like 160, I suppose, 150, 160 for like hour, 2 hours. You want those cherry tomatoes the skin to start bursting and get a little bit of color, and that's going to create the sweetness in the olive oil. So I did it in the smoker because it meant that I wasn't taking up anything else, but also it's easy to keep a really low temperature in the smoker because it's a smoker. So I did it in cast iron in the smoker and let it go for a couple of hours until it looked right for us. We then put that confit with the tomatoes and stuff into little dipping bowls, and we just slice up the focaccia and you dip it into the dipping bowls. It is so good. So good. It's really easy to eat though. So those 2 loaves of focaccia, which are like a 500 gram flour base each, plus that confit, we eat that in one sitting, basically, the 8 of us, because it's just so easy to eat. But I do love focaccia in the way that it is so versatile for so many things. You slice it horizontally and it works for sandwiches and stuff too. So we do make it fairly regularly because it's good. So for dinner that night, I cooked up the whole chook from the hamper with potatoes. So there was a whole chicken in the hamper, and I just put potatoes underneath it, put the chicken on top, put a lemon under up its bum, sprayed it with oil, and then used the bacon seasoning that I have been making that I mentioned before, the bacon salt, over the top of the chicken and roasted it. I also roasted the 2 rolled chickens as well, and we used part of one for dinner and the other went in the fridge. But I just thought I'd cook it all up at once because it was chicken. I left it in the fridge as soon as we got it from the hamper and thought I'd cook it all up. Now, a whole chicken isn't really a meal for all of us. It's not enough for 8, just one chicken. It is if you have plenty of veggies, but veggies aren't a huge abundance for us at the moment. Like, we've got enough to eat frozen veggies, but nothing, like, it's not like we've got an abundant garden that we can draw from at the moment. So we had the potatoes and the chicken, but I made a half serve of the pesto pasta that we make as well. So pesto, egg yolks, lemon juice, olive oil in the pasta, and then the pasta just gets mixed through it. I also added what was left over of the cherry tomato confit into a pasta, like the pesto pasta, so that one of them was a tomato basil pesto pasta thing, which is lovely because those tomatoes were so creamy and sweet at that point and mixed through the pasta, so it was really nice. So we had the pesto pasta as a side, as well as the whole chicken, and then we ate a bit of the rolled chicken, and the rest of the rolled chicken went in the fridge. Next day, for breakfast. So as I said, when I roasted the whole chicken, I roasted the rolled roast as well. So the next day I unwrapped the roast from the foil and I sliced it up into pieces. It had a stuffing in it. It was quite pleasant. It was rolled pieces of chicken. There was dark and light meat in the rolled chicken, and it had that stuffing in the middle. I don't remember what flavour the stuffing was or anything. I'm sure it said on the packet, but I didn't really look. So I cooked up some of my flatbreads that I do just the same day, yeasted flatbreads that I make, so that we could, and fried them off in the cast iron, and we had that with the rolled chicken and the coleslaw. I think there was leftover potato in that as well, from the underneath the chicken, so we cooked up just the rolled chicken with the potato in a pan, cast iron pan, heated it all up, cooked off all the flatbreads, and then I had some coleslaw left from a previous meal as well that we found in the fridge. Some cabbage that had been shredded up, mayo, and had that in the flatbread. So the chicken, potato, coleslaw flatbreads. I made a stewed plum dessert for after dinner. So I pulled that together. Basically, I just filled the bottom of a pot with plums so that they could cook, and then put a basic crumble over the top. Just flour, coconut oil, oats, nuts, bit of sugar over the top. And then baked it. It was very simple. I didn't really follow any recipes or anything. I just threw it together until it looked good. It was stewed plums with a crumble on top. Just something to use up some of the plums and see how the kids felt about it like that. I didn't sugar the plums or anything either. I don't think. Just sugar in the crumble topping. For dinner, I used some of the breakfast flavoured sausage that I had spoken about in the pork video, the previous video. So some of the sausage meat, some of the pork that I had minced, I did the standard breakfast sausage, sage, maple type thing, flavouring to it. I used some of that to make sausage gravy for us to eat. Now, this is not going to be anywhere near normal, I don't imagine. I just threw it together. I cooked off the sausage, used a little bit of the gravy powder as well as the flour to give it that little bit of extra flavour. I used kefir as my liquid because we don't use cream or milk or anything, so I thought kefir would go through. The kefir worked really well. It actually gave it sort of this sweetness, an added sweetness, as well as the maple that was in the sausage. It was really nice, and I just served it over mashed potato. Again, this is where having some greens and stuff in the garden would be really nice. Being able to just go out and grab some greens from the garden to have with this would have just been marvellous. I'm still working on it, but it is a bit sad. That's what I miss the most about the garden being a failure at the moment, is the lack of being able to just go out and grab kale, silver beet, anything like that, wilt it slightly and serve it with a meal like this. It would just make the meal better. When we had the plum dessert, I had made some sweetened cashew cream, so basically just cashews that had been soaked, blitzed up with a little bit of sugar and vanilla until it was the right consistency, and just poured over the top of the pudding as like a cream topping. You can do it thick or thin or however you want. I probably needed to tone down the sweetness of the crumble topping if I'm serving it with the sweetened cashew cream, because it was all a little too sweet for me, but the kids really liked it, of course. The next day I made some puff pastry covered sausages. So there was some red hot dog sausages that came in the hamper, and I normally make a dough, like a pizza dough type dough, and wrap the sausages and bake them like that. But I had found when I was reorganizing the freezer that I had a bunch of puff pastry that was from last month. So I've got 2 brand new packets that I bought this month, but there was some left over from last month that was in a Ziploc bag. So I pulled that out to use with it. So I caramelized some onion and bacon in the cast iron pan first, and then I used some of the cashew cheese that we'd used in another meal. Now I assume that was from the nachos that was in the previous video, but those nachos might have been a dinner meal and somewhere here that I've missed somehow. But anyway, had cashew cheese left over, so we used that in there as well and wrapped them with the puff pastry. Now I obviously had the heat a little high because the sausages split, but that's par for the course when you've got hot dog sausages. They have a tendency to split in heat. They have a tendency to split when you boil them. They have a tendency to split. They're hot dog sausages. So they definitely not picture perfect, but they were super tasty anyway. And we had them with a bit of apple butter barbecue. I also made a couple of little pastries with just the caramelized onion and bacon mix and a little bit of cheese in little parcels, just as a treat for myself as well. I'm not a huge fan of hot dog sausages. They're okay, but they're not really my favorite thing. But the kids really enjoy them, and they would just eat them cold, and that's kind of gross. So I would prefer to make something out of them so that they ate them like that. For dinner we had pizza. So the dough had been made early in the day, shaped and refrigerated for the day. I discovered that I didn't have any pizza sauce left on the pantry shelves though, so we used the apple butter barbecue to make them barbecue sauce based, just because it was nice and easy. We do all the normal stuff that we do for pizza every time you see us make pizza, which generally there's a pizza night in most of these what we eat in weeks, because generally we have pizza once a week. So it was salami, there's corn, some of the chorizo seasoned minced from the pork video, the previous pork video that I had cooked up, the pineapple that I had canned, Darryl and a few of the kids like anchovies, and the marinated mushrooms that I had made. They all like them on it. There's a few kids like Surreal likes the anchovies but doesn't like the mushrooms, and I think Apollo and Sonnet like the anchovies and the mushrooms. So, you know, whatever I ask as I'm making them. Each child gets their own pizza. Whatever they don't eat goes in the fridge, covered, and that's their breakfast the next day, because apparently cold pizza is fantastic breakfast. Not my cup of tea, but whatever, it's to their taste. And then because we still had some cashew cheese left, we topped it with cashew cheese. If we don't have cashew cheese, then generally they use mayo. I make a duck egg mayo up and they use a mayo drizzle, but we had the cashew cheese, so that's what they use this time. I made my own pizza with real cheese because I can, and I do. And we got a bunch of bags of cheese in the hamper, bunch of grated cheese, so I've been working my way through that as well. So needs to be eaten. That's what I can use that as an excuse. The next day for breakfast we did, or lunch, whatever you want to call it, we did sort of small oval shaped flatbreads / naans. They're not in a rich dough, it's just a plain yeasted dough. Naan normally has a yogurt or something in it. These didn't, but they're similar sort of a thing, with butter chicken from the shelf. So I canned butter chicken a few videos ago. And when I can the butter chicken, I don't add any cream or anything. So then when I reheat it, I pour the chicken into a pan. I add a tin of coconut cream and a sort of like 1/8 of a cup of cashews that I've ground up into a meal. And that gives it the thickness, gives it some consistency. And then we heat it through. So there's not a huge amount of chicken in the butter chicken in the jar. Which is fine. We are aware of that. We generally eat these for lunch because Darryl has some issues with reflux if he has curry for dinner. So generally speaking, we have this for lunch anyway. And it's a good lunch for even all 8 of us can have a small dipping bowl of the butter chicken and a couple of these naans with ghee and a bit of salt and garlic powder on them. So we make these small dipping breads and we have little dipping bowls of butter chicken, and we enjoy eating the breads dipped in that butter chicken. So the butter chicken is more of a side to the bread than the bread a side to the butter chicken, I suppose. We could open 2 jars, but that would probably end up being too much when there's not enough chicken in it. So because it ends up really saucy, and the coconut cream tones all the heat down, it ends up a really nice sort of a sweet butter chicken, really saucy, and it just tastes really good with the with the bread dipped. So we really enjoy it. I definitely have to make more of that for the shelf because it's something that I reach for lunch when it's cold quite often. For dinner that night, we had one of our noodle stir fries. So we buy the noodles from Aldi. They are shelf, like in the fridge section, the noodles there. We have a bunch of eggs at the moment, so I hard scrambled a bunch of eggs. I used some of the chorizo mince, the mince that I had, pork that I had minced and flavoured with the chorizo style flavouring that was in the previous video, the pork video. We still had half a cabbage left, so I shredded up all the cabbage. We didn't have any carrots at the moment, and I could have pulled some frozen veg out or some corn or something, but there was enough there with the cabbage, and the cabbage needs using anyway. So I just did the cabbage with the noodles. I used the Recipe Tin Eats stir fry sauce. Recipe Tin Eats is the name of this website. I use their stir fry sauce. So what I do is I mix it all up into a ghee jar, a 1 litre jar. I shake it all up, add water to it, shake it all up, and then I add it to the stir fry when I'm making it and cook it off until all the noodles are nice and shiny and sticky and well coated in the sauce, and then it works for us. So that was our meals for a week-ish. I think it's longer than a week. I think it's 9 or 10 days, but around about a week. And there was a couple of dinners missed there for some reason. I don't know. Maybe as I said, if we have bolognese regularly, then I just let them handle it. I don't deal with it. Or I couldn't be bothered and I just say, go and grab a jar of something off the shelf and have soup or something or whatever. So every now and again, I don't prepare dinner. It's not very often, but every now and again I don't prepare dinner, and if I'm not preparing it, then generally speaking I'm not going to film it, and they won't even think to film it anyway. So I try sometimes, if I remember that I'm supposed to be filming it, I'll take a clip on my phone just so that I've got a tiny clip to share, but I don't think I even did that with most of them this time, so there's a couple of dinners missing. But that is around about a week of meals for our family of 8 living off-grid in Australia, with our shopping every 6 weeks and using the community hamper in amongst all the food as well. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you drew some inspiration from how we use the food that might help you along the way, and I will see you all on the next video. Thanks guys.